Gary Schmidt, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. This is a meeting of the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District Board of Directors. What day is this? Wednesday, December 7th, 2022. Our staff support today first is Jeff Munns, Assistant Counsel, Michael Bork, the Director of the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District, Clerk of the Board, Tony Marinick, and I'm Gary Schmidt, the District Administrator. Roll call on Zoom, Director Schrader.
Here.
In the room, Director Schultz. Here. Director Fisher.
Here.
Director Savas.
Present.
Chair Smith.
Here. Please rise and we'll say the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to
The republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and
for all.
sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner Schrader, for that.
Thank you. Well, I hope it wasn't too bad. Also,
You're fine.
just let me thank you for letting me stay at home. I wasn't, I had some issues I had to deal with. Thank you.
That's fine, and that's why we have technology. Well, welcome everyone to the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District Board of Directors meeting. We are holding this meeting virtually and in person. If you've joined us via Zoom for this meeting and are interested in providing public comment, we will prompt you regarding how to do that when the time is right. General public comment will be taken at the usual allotted time. I would like to remind all participants, including staff, all elected officials, and members of the public that Robert's Rules of Order will be followed during this business meeting. We welcome your opinions and look forward to your polite comments. Gary, County Administrator, what's up first?
Thank you, Chair Smith. First, we have a presentation, the fiscal year 2022-2023 first quarter district financial report. Mike Bork, the Director of the district, will present. Go ahead.
Thank you, Gary, and good evening, directors. I know that you've received our packet, so I'm going to really make this fairly brief and just provide a quick summary. This is our first quarter financial report. In the packet, you have 2 pages that provide summaries, and then the rest of the spreadsheet are just backup documentation that supports these. So I'm going to focus on these first 2 pages. Just as a review, NCPRD has 5 funds: our general fund, 3 SDC zonal funds, as well as our asset development fund. I won't go into any great detail on any one particular area unless you have specific questions. What I was just planning on summarizing was in our first quarter, we typically have not brought in hardly any of our property taxes, and we at the same time have not spent a whole lot of our expenditures in this first quarter at this point. So that's what you see reflected in the report here, is just not a whole lot of activity other than our normal daily business going on in the first quarter. If you want, I can go over just the general balances as we see in the first quarter.
Please.
So in the general fund, our beginning fund balance was $10.2 million. The ending fund balance is 9.6 at the end of the first quarter. Again, not a lot of revenue coming into us yet. You see $1.3 million, and that's very small compared to our estimate of what we will bring in. Again, property taxes are collected in November, so this does not reflect any of that. Within our SDC funds, in Zone 1, we actually have the City of Milwaukee as well as the Urban Growth Management area. And so in Zone 1, you can see the breakout fund balances at the bottom, or I guess 2/3 of the way down. For the City of Milwaukee, ending fund balance is $1.9 million. The UGMA is $3.968 million. In Zone 2, that ending fund balance is $2.4 million. And in Zone 3, it's $2.477 million. And then in our asset development fund, this is the fund that we use to do capital work planning and generally managing the assets and capital projects within the district, has an ending fund balance again of just this first quarter at $7.398 million. And so in general, my overall to conclude is we're on track to what we expect we should be seeing in this first quarter. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
You say we have not received the property tax yet, and how much do you expect that to be?
I believe it's right around $8 million.
Okay, great. Commissioner Savas,
Yeah, Mike, just,
excuse me, Director Savas.
there we go. Yeah, I get to change hats.
Yeah,
So just a clarification, I think we all know, well, maybe everyone knows, but I just thought maybe we could use some different verbiage on the line where it says city of Milwaukee, at least probably the reader the impression that those SDCs belong to the city of Milwaukee, but they're district SDCs.
Correct.
So they're just, this is really the Milwaukee zone than it is really the city of Milwaukee. I just don't want the reader to leave the impression that those are dollars that are property of the city. They are property of the district.
Yeah, they're dollars that are collected by the city of Milwaukee, transferred to us, and then, but they are SDC dollars collected for the NCPRD.
And could we just change some verbiage there to identify that, so the reader can understand that it just leaves, the impression that it's not that of the
We'll
district.
make that change for second.
Thank you.
and directors, if you need to speak, just holler at me. I don't have the benefit of lights and I may not see your card come up. Paul's easy, he's sitting right next to me, but if you need any comments, just grab my attention, please. Any other qualifying questions about this particular presentation? Don't see any. Gary, what's next?
All right, very good. Thank you, Mike. The next presentation is a report from the chair of the District Advisory Committee for the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. Grover Bornfeld is the chair of the committee. He is also on Zoom tonight. So Tony, please bring in Grover. And let me know his input.
Hello, everyone. This is me, and good evening to the Board of Directors. I would like to be there in person, but my wife and I are on vacation and out of the country, but I didn't want to miss this opportunity to speak with you all. So,
Well, welcome, Grover. I appreciate you being able to Zoom in tonight, and I hope you have a great vacation. We all wish we were vacationing as well.
I know I'm not missing the weather that's up there, although I always worry about what goes on when I'm not. Anyway,
Thank you.
so as I said, I'm Grover Jeffrey Bornefeld, and I'm an NCPRD resident volunteering as a district advisory chair. And I've been serving as a board of directors appointed NCPRD district advisory board, task force, and district advisory committee resident volunteer since 2019. As requested in the past, I have a short report tonight. So a growing group of us residents have been actively engaged in expanding the NCPRD's residents' awareness, appreciation, inclusion, and trust of our Parks and Recreation District. With the Board of Directors' direction, we are proud of our collective progress creating a revised and adopted DAC bylaws, which incorporate the requested proportional sub-area resident representation that the Board of Directors appointed task force design and was designed and approved the DAC policy for sub-areas 1 through 4 residents to select their own DAC representatives in alignment with the DAC bylaws. The representatives worked to generate resident community engagement, input and concerns, forming Friends of Local Parks groups, including River Villa, Justice Property, Jennings Lodge, Alma Myra, and New Urban, as well as under the new process just rolled out by NCPRD, the Adopt a Park group. Justice Property is registered, and there are other groups that are working to put that together. The primary purpose of our DAC is to, in fact, advise you, the Board of Directors. And while expanding involvement and informed awareness expanding the involvement and informed awareness among our neighbors. Within this process of preparing to advise you on NCPRD issues, a number of questions have arisen. The first is, who initiated changing the long-planned property sale to lease for the new Clackamas County Library at the Concord property site, and that the county library building would be transferred from the county to NCPRD at the end of the lease? Another question is, who decided to propose this NCPRD governance change launch now? And then who concluded NCPRD cannot afford considering requested all-inclusive park facility designs? What determined that it is unnecessary to explore if the NCPRD integrated pest management plan is currently considering the concerns of park neighbors about the effect of toxic chemicals on the soil? Who decided that the request for a CIP park planning process from community with more requests for community involvement from several underserved NCPRD residents was not an option? And then who was the sub-area DAC selection and expansion policy? No, excuse me, how was the sub-area DAC selection and expansion policy, which was approved by the board of directors, determined not to be aligned with the approved bylaws? So with these questions, how can the DAC continue providing informed planning advisement and actively expand the NCPRD's residents' involvement, awareness, appreciation, and inclusion, build the trust in our Parks and Rec district, and foster increased funding, which is important to all of us? So that's my report, and the DAC looks forward to hearing your thoughts on these issues.
Thank you, Grover. We're gonna. We've raised several questions and we are prepared in reports tonight. If you would be patient while we work through the discussion items, hopefully you can get some answers to your questions. If not, there will be time at the end of the meeting for further participation, questions, and discussion. So with that in mind, Gary, do the directors have any qualifying questions for the presenter, Grover, right now? Okay, so we're going to go ahead with the next item, and that is the board discussion on the status report on the Concord building, and that would be Mike Board.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. Again, I will try and provide a summary of the report that I had presented to you in the packet, and really just wanted to give you an update on kind of three different, but all related to the Concord building projects. The first is the overall, what we're calling the overall project, the library and the park and the playground and new parking lot and improvements to this building. After that, the Concord infrastructure project that we had talked about, and I'll provide some details. And then an update on our administrative office relocation to the facility. So with the overall project with the library and park playground, we have reached a 50% design for the overall project. There are still some challenges in completing, even getting to a real complete 50% design, with some land issues that I'll be bringing to the board's attention in a different venue that we need to make some decisions on before we can really finalize the land plan. But other than that, we're moving forward. I believe the library building itself is near complete on the design, but there are some other land issues that need to be worked through. But we do anticipate it with the now that we're able to move forward and start looking at park and playground and play space, park space, we are planning on doing some community engagement in the next coming months to help solidify what plans actually get put in for construction, engaging with the local community in the district to really just re-verify what information was gained about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when the task force was first starting to take things on. We need some more specificity as we start looking at types of playground surfaces, inclusive play elements, things like that. The other component to the overall project is we are looking at alternative funding sources. There were some desired enhancements that originally were listed as alternatives, things like the covered shelter, the new covered shelter, the spray ground area, some other play elements. So we are looking and reviewing some of our existing funding sources and looking at any alternative funding sources that we can to at least get some of those be able to be funded through alternatives. And we're pretty confident that we'll be able to take care of at least some of that. So that's, if you want, I can stop if anybody's got questions about the overall project before I move on to the
Questions or comments for Mike on this?
Well, just
Go
one,
ahead.
Chair. That is, Mike, I just want to, I know you weren't here time, I think, but you've been here in the latter stages of that. And that is that the task force that was formed with members representing the NCPRD district, citizen members, and also members representing libraries and so forth for this entire project. So the work, when you said community engagement, I'm hoping we go to those folks first.
Well, at least concurrently, yeah, we've got a fairly short timeline on our engagement. So the plan was we were going to be engaging with task force members, other members in the surrounding area, and putting out informational stuff for district, wide as well as we try and hone in. But we're trying to honor the original plans, really just have a chance in there. For instance, there was some general statements like have it be inclusive play, but there's a lot that's involved in that. So we need to drill down now that we're getting to closer to construction time. What does that actually mean to me?
What I was trying to say here is that Cindy Becker, who has been kind of leading the task force, has assured the task force members, both NCPRD members as well as library folks, that whatever changes or opportunities would come up, that they would be involved. So at the very minimum, they should be involved in the beginning. So I just want to make sure that they're mentioned. The reason I say that is because on the next item, there's no mention of the task force, but we'll get to that later.
Okay.
Further questions or comments? Commissioners, directors? I'll get it right by the end of the meeting. Okay, thank you. Gary, what's up next?
Yes, will you finish, Mike?
Yep. So for the Concord infrastructure repairs, if you recall, this is something I came to you all with last fall. While we were figuring out the overall project, I identified some key infrastructure repairs that were part of the original plan. They were going all the way back to the beginning of needed repairs to the facility, including roof replacement, HVAC or air handling in some way, shape, or form. With the advent of the new library, a new elevator located on this end of the building, and some seismic upgrades while the roof is exposed up at the truss level as well. So that project is moving forward, but it's been slow. We had to do an amendment to our existing contract to allow for the design work on that. It was just not held up, but just delayed in the processing of that. We finally are able to move forward with that. We anticipate we're going to be doing some new actual contractual estimating to see where those individual elements come in at price wise, and then hope to be able to move forward this upcoming spring, summer with those infrastructure repairs. With this one, we had not considered this as part of what kind of play equipment and park designs, because this is truly infrastructure. It's HVAC, it's roofing, it's electrical service, it's an elevator. It's fairly straightforward.
Okay. Questions regarding that? Go ahead. Has the contractor been selected?
It's OPSIS. It's the same contractor that we're using. We just needed to amend their contract.
Okay, got it. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I'm just going a little bit farther down and looking at the administrative office relocation summary you've got there, and I'm noting that what was discovered, as you say, for the initial use permit, that administrative offices are not allowed to use. So it sounds like from what I understand, maybe you give us a thumbnail or a summary sketch of what the hearings officer said, but I'm just getting it secondhand that some of these changes are as a result of the administrative offices, not really as a park, not really as a library. So what's the status, and will those costs be entirely borne by the NCPRD because they are administrative offices for NCPRD.
Right, and the costs are fairly nominal as far, we're again. The building is designated as a community center. Based on its zoning of R7 zoning, recreational use of the facility is an allowable use. But specifically, there's a provision that does not allow government administrative offices in R7 zoning. So because of that, for us to relocate our offices here, we needed to get that conditional use. This is a completely separate and different conditional use permit from the overall library project that'll have all the things about the expanded parking and lighting and, street access and all of that. Specifically, this conditional use is about our access for those administrative offices. We did have the hearing, as indicated in the report. The Planning and Zoning Department did recommend approval with conditions. Some of the conditions were fairly large and ones that we were trying to avoid doing, because to do them now, we would have to tear it up and redo it when the bigger project starts. I believe we're working feverishly. We have a 7-day period that ends tomorrow to submit additional information to our hearing officer. I believe that we've come to agreement with planning and zoning and transportation on how to meet all of those conditions. We won't know that though until we submit that to planning and zoning. They're going to write a memo to send to the hearing officer and see where it goes. So that is, but that's specifically just to us being able to have 8 workstations in this building, nothing to do with the overall larger project.
Thank you.
And that was application made through Clackamas County
Correct.
Committee, and it would seem that our planning department would have been mindful of what we want to do with this building and not be so over the top on the requirements to have office space here when they know we're going to remodel. And I find it just astounding. I mean, is the left hand not talking to the right hand, Gary?
They're just following the law, Chair.
Well, I tell you, they need to be paying attention. And this project has been on the books for a very long time, and I'm not really happy with that process at all. Thank you very much. What's
Thank
up
you.
next?
Okay, so again, Commissioner Director, these are all discussion items tonight, no decisions necessary. We're just filling you in on projects in process and seeking your guidance and input on these items. The second item is status report on the land lease agreement between the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District and the Library District of Clackamas County at this site, the Concord site. I will present with Mike and Jeff. So to start, Commissioner Directors, that's tough to know that. Directors, earlier this year, I shared with you that at my request, our Clackamas County Internal Auditor did a review of the governance structure of the Parks District to see if there were areas for improvement. And one that the auditor, Jody Cochran, identified was that there should be an intergovernmental agreement between the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District and the Clackamas County government on how we operate, how we do business, how we interact together. Because believe it or not, there is not an existing one, or at least one that's not updated. Part of that work was also to look at the land owned by the district, and in particular, this property, the Concord School, especially as it relates to the future Oak Lodge Oak Grove Library, that the task force and the community and the board of commissioners and the directors have discussed. Really, this is the best location for that future library site. So at your request and my request, staff has put together the bare bones of what a ground lease could look like. So again, this is not the final agreement. This is not the lease. This is the bones of what it could look like, seeking your input and guidance of any questions or concerns you have as we come forward for you next year in 2023 for an actual lease. So I'll turn it over to Jeff and Mike. So again, this is Jeff. The opening discussion, no decisions have been made. I know Grover brought this up in his comments as well, but seeking your input and guidance on what you would like this to look like. If you don't want to do a lease at all and just have the county buy the land, everything's on the table. So with that, Jeff or Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, and looking at this question about how to formalize an agreement between the county and NCPRD, there's a lot of different factors. One is to keep this parcel intact as much as possible for NCPRD. And then to give the county the maximum usage of this property for the library operations. And so one option would be to do a lot line adjustment, to partition the property such that you have a parcel available for the library. That has one set of, planning criteria attached to it that would be different than a lease, a ground lease, which would have potentially less so. And that's something that, as this process goes forward, more will be, discussed with planning and zoning to determine what the precisely best path would be for that circumstance. But the ground lease generally will give us some more flexibility with that. And then the other terms proposed or just discussed in the staff report regarding a lease, there's a couple of different ways to structure this. One would be to have NCPRD charge rent to the county for the library, for the ground they're renting. And then this would be something that the county would have to pay for the library to be in that site. The other would be, minimal rent, which you see a lot between different government entities. At the end, though, of a term of the lease, which would have to be at least as long as the useful life of the library, and certainly any, grants or bonds associated with it. What do you do with this building at the end of it? It's owned by one party, but it's on land owned by another. Oftentimes, at the end of that, especially if there's been, no rent charge, essentially, or $1 a year, then sometimes the equitable thing to do is to transfer that building back to the property owner, the landowner. If there had been market rent paid the entire time, then the party who owns the ground would then buy that building at the end of the lease term. So there's different ways to structure this. What's the best way for the two parties is something that we're looking into. We'll be coming back with further recommendations, but these are some of the factors we're looking at. And then as you look at this, you have other factors to build into this agreement that you need to be aware of is what if there's a successor entity to NCPRD at some point? If it's no longer a county service district, but a park and recreation district in a different form or some other method. Also, what if this area of unincorporated Clackamas County incorporates and that city decides they want to provide library services in the future? They could do so. And then under Chapter 222, they could potentially take that library and operate it from the county under that statute for annexing, essentially create this new city here. They want to provide the service they could. But that potentially would be something that library would transfer as well. Trying to build some of these contingencies into it, just really to create as much stability as possible in this agreement is what we're looking for. So it's such that library operations aren't interrupted, park operations aren't interrupted, and there's not some financial huge windfall or detriment to either party as we go through this. So there's the factors that we're trying to weigh as we go forward. And so that's really to help, and then get your input to help shape that discussion and the eventual decision.
Thank you for that. Any questions or comments from directors? Director Samus.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, I was taken aback by this concept of the 50-year, give it back to the district kind of thing. I'm gonna digress and just talk about how I really came into public service, and that was really a feud that was taking place between two districts at the time, water districts, and they were trying to make a joint effort for the benefit of the citizens they're serving, and they got tied up on an agreement that was woefully unfair. It took a couple of 3 years to settle it, but we settled it in the best interest of each of the parties and mutual best interest of people being served. And I could tell more stories about that, not about that in particular, but about other disputes between jurisdictions. I always felt that good agreements, fair agreements that serve the people are the wisest and most responsible. So I anticipated one of two things, either a lot line condition adjustment where the county, acquires the property for library purposes with some kind of reversionary clause that it stays in public use or for a library. Certainly that it's on the footprint or the proximity being obviously directly adjacent, contiguous with the park property, if it was adjusted separately. That if it did revert back to doing another purpose, that the district could have maybe a first option, right, for park purposes. Or a lease that would go on in perpetuity. Granted, this building here is far older than 50 years old, right? We're using it today, and I imagine if we built a library here, it'd live at least 50 years and serve well beyond 50 years. Granted, But I'm taken aback by this, being transferred back. I have a problem with that. And I also think that frankly, we need to have greater engagement with all parties, and it doesn't sound like that took place. Doesn't sound like we reached out to the library board, Clackamas County Library Board. Doesn't sound like we reached out to even the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners or ourselves until here today. So I was a little bit shocked to see that in the packet. So I would prefer, speaking to my colleagues, I would prefer that we look at two options of a lease with a renewable, whatever that modest fee is per year for a lease for the land, with a not reversionary clause, but a first option or whatever it may be, and or a purchase of some sort. But I don't think it's responsible. We're serving the same people here. It's the area of the district is that of the library and the district are pretty near, almost for the most part, near one and the same. So those are my comments, Chair.
Well, I don't think that this is being presented with an exclusionary factor in mind. I mean, how else do we get information out to the public but present it at a meeting like this? I mean, we're not going to go out to the district, I don't think, and you use the expression, the cart in front of the horse, and say, oh, district, you go out here and make your decision before the board of directors or the board of commissioners discusses it. I think it's very important that we have a presentation from our attorney so that people out there can understand exactly what the mitigating legal factors are, and they are serious. Now, if the library district was to buy a part of that property, it has a valuation. As far as I know, the library for this area is still short on funds to construct its initial building. I don't know how they're going to afford any more purchase of land unless you expect it to be given to you. But there's a lot of mitigating factors here. And I think all options need to be considered because that's the best way to go at it. And they all need to be considered. They all need to be fairly vetted. We are not making decisions tonight on anything. We are merely presenting what needs to be done. And I do think the citizens who are part of this, who serve on these boards, and the directors who serve us really need to pay attention to the county's attorneys going forward on this. Because we're trying to get the most equitable, correct solution for moving forward so you people can have a library within a park. Now, isn't that our end result? And to me, that is a very beautiful occurrence to be able to come out in a beautiful park setting, play, throw the balls around, and then on the way home, oh, I think I'll stop in and check out a book and go home for all the kids and users. So I think we need to keep our end result in mind, that we need to move forward and we need to start making accomplishments on this area. This the Board of County Commissioners, I think, was very generous in offering that $6 million of ARPA funds for the construction of the library, and we all need to remember that. I think it's very generous that the Parks District is offering up part of their property for the construction of the library, and we need to remember that. And so I would really pay attention to what county staff and the attorneys have to say that's going to. I don't have a druthers either way. I just want to be fair. I don't want to be bogged down in endless litigation, going back and forth and bickering on this. So it would behoove everybody, including Grover, you folks here who make up the board, to make a decision and go forward. Commissioner Scholl.
Yeah, and before we can make that decision, Mr. Runs in your memo here says a lease is the preferred form of this agreement instead of condition the property. And then it goes on to say the staff's reviewing a draft ground lease document for board approval in early 2023. But I just want to make sure that we're going to get a time when we can review pros and cons of the different options. And then those pros and cons will also be shared with the district advisory committee before we consider which way to go on this.
Yeah, I think whatever the board instructs as far as public outreach is something that staff is going to do. This discussion today is simply the first discussion of this process. And so we'll be coming to you with updates as we move through it and get more guidance as we give you those pros and cons as we get to kind of drill down on this issue and get more input.
Okay.
Director Fisher.
Yes. Okay, a couple questions. In the materials, if you could just explain at the termination of the lease term, the building would be transferred to NCPRD.
Yeah, that's sort of the initial thought on this is that if you don't charge rent for all those years for the ground lease, essentially, then at the end of this, you could transfer the ownership back to the Parks District. Not decided yet, obviously. The idea then would be that if you continue to have the library in that location, one, you could either continue the ground lease instead of doing a transfer at what the appropriate terms are at that time, because we're talking about something at minimum, 25 years, but more likely 50 plus years in the future. And what the needs are going to be of the community for a library then are not known. We're a lot bigger county now than we were in 1972. So, putting that in consideration, what would be necessary there. But at that point, you could also, if the Parks District were to own it, they could simply lease it back for operations. And that gives some other host of options for that arrangement. So it's one way of looking at this as we go forward of how we can structure the agreement. But it's with an eye towards keeping this property whole potentially, as well as giving NCPRD small flexibility if needed in the future for the operations of this site. But we're at the beginning of this.
Gary Schmidt.
Yes, I would ask directors, if you are absolutely opposed to a ground lease, we would like to hear that tonight so we can pursue other options. And or if you do want us staff to pursue a sale as well, we can bring that back to you as well. So you're not deciding tonight, but we would appreciate your guidance as we were moving forward. Thank you.
Director Scholl.
Yes, I can't give my opinion on guidance once I see the pros and cons of all the options.
Director Fisher.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that the board look at pros and cons, and we do all kinds of intergovernmental agreements and leases, and we do that all the time as governments, and I don't see an issue with it if it's a win-win for both entities. And I think what Commissioner Savas says, that we're serving all the same people, it's really important. That's really true. But that was the same issue when the school district had this building, same constituents, and then NCPRD took it. And I mean, there's different entities do different arrangements a lot, and public entities, and that's to look at a list of pros and cons. But the simplest, cleanest, and honestly, board, I'm not going to be here to make this decision, but I really suggest that you listen to Jeff and the legal team, because they will have all the pieces best. You don't have a crystal ball ever. You never know what's going to happen in the future, but at least legally to create the most legally stable environment moving forward.
I would agree with that too. Listening to all people, just listening to the attorneys. They don't really have a preference. They're just trying to the most equitable, efficient way to go forward and be legally sound. I have no preference over leaves over one or the other. I'm going to call on Director Schrader. Are you online? Would you like to make a comment on this?
Yes, Chair, I've been listening to this pretty diligently. I do agree. I think we need to let the lawyers craft something that they think is doable and possible. I agree with Commissioner Fisher's statements. It's serving all the same people. So I just want to see it finally to move ahead one way or another and not have us get drawn into protracted conversations about what I think should be a pretty straightforward opportunity. Again, I don't have a preference either way either. I'm in agreement with you and Commissioner Fisher and Commissioner Scholl with that. Although I appreciate Commissioner Savas' attention to detail on this, because he is looking out for everybody's interest as well.
Commissioner, excuse me, Director Sass.
Director status. Director status, sorry.
And the dog agrees. I just want to just state that this was a joint effort from the beginning with the library investment and so forth. So while we're looking at one piece of land potentially, but as this agreement is crafted, along with the building that's going to be paid for and built and erected on it. What's not really factored in here is the improvements needed that are not on the property. Parking, for example, we can't just, I mean, the library investment from the county is buying the improvements are on the property, all around the perimeter. We're sharing in that cost. We're sharing in the parking. There's things that you really can't take. I go back even to that agreement that I talked about earlier years ago, and that view that the water we drink here on this property comes from a joint joint effort of the North Clackamas County Water Commission, and it's a joint effort between 2 or 3 districts, and that's expected to go on in perpetuity. That there is no transfer of the property to one to the other. So again, for the public good, I'm okay with the lease to the director's to the administrator's question. I'm okay with the lease, but I'm not okay with a transfer back of the property. I think there needs to be an ongoing lease that is renewable. And if there's, I'm okay with something reasonable, like is it maintains use as a library in the future, some kind of stipulation to that effect. But that's an investment the county's making, and we're making on this property. And so if it is a lease, and I totally respect the fact that it is a benefit to the park aspects, as the chair stated earlier. So I want to look at both a sale and a lease.
Very beautiful farm. Gary, we've allocated ARPA funds to the construction of the library.
Yes,
And what is the date on that?
has to be, it has to be spent by 2025, I believe is the year. Jeff, do you remember? It's 2 years.
I thought it was 24.
I don't remember exactly, but it's, we need to keep moving.
We need to keep moving, and we really cannot afford to delay, so we're just gonna have to go through this and get her done. Okay, and seriously, we're trying to work through the legal matters on this. Any further questions on this particular topic or comments? Thank you, directors. Gary, what's next?
Thank you. So we'll take all this feedback and bring back to you all the options, pros and cons at your next board meeting in early 2023. Thank you. Next discussion item is status report on the system development charge methodology update. Mike will present.
Thank you, Gary, and again, thank you, directors. We wanted to provide an update on where we were on the system development charge methodology study. To just recap, back in October of last year, we were given direction to re-engage or kind of start back up the conversations that have been happening prior to COVID regarding the system development charges. And so as we re-engaged with the same consultant that had done the work previous back last November, we started with generally the same assumptions that it had been stopped at. And the main one being that we would be looking at a methodology that removed the zones, that had just a single methodology for the entire district. And that was the direction that it had been headed before things had been put on hiatus. So that was the basis of what we started this new methodology study with FCS, the consultant group. And over the last essentially year, there's been work with the DAC on presentations from FCS. But most of it has been staff working with the consultant to get them the right information for them to be able to do their methodology study and provide numbers. The end result that we hope to get at when we actually adopt a methodology is a maximum allowable amount to be charged. But with the city of Milwaukee uncertainty coming up, we have put the system development charge methodology on hold for a couple of reasons. First of all, we would have to choose one methodology or another, a methodology that includes the city of Milwaukee or one that does not. In addition to that, the city of Milwaukee's council had removed their support for non-zonal methodology as they had previously supported back in the original. So for a couple of different factors, we have put the system development charge methodology study on hold until the city of Milwaukee issue has been resolved. But we anticipate, and you see through the slides that we provided in there, once it's restarted, whenever that is, there's still a bit of a process. There's going to have to be refinement of the numbers, presentations to the DAC, debt presentations to you, an open public comment period. So there's still months worth of work to continue to do. We just didn't feel it was responsible to go any further in where we were in the study while we had the city of Milwaukee issue kind of hanging.
Mike, the annual collection for FYI 22-23 is projected at $657,310. Is that inclusive of the city of Milwaukee?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so it'd be less if the city of Milwaukee were to exit from the district.
Yes.
Questions for the presenter and directors on this?
I'll just say, I think it's wise to just pause on this until such time, Mike, as you say, that we have some kind of understanding where we're headed with the city of Milwaukee as a partner, continued partner, or perhaps not.
Director Schrader?
Yes, I am fine with that. I think it's a good idea.
I do too. I think we're in agreement with that. Thank you, directors on this. Seeing no further questions on this topic. Gary, what's next?
All right, thank you. Next is a status report on the city of Milwaukee proposal to leave the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. I'll present this along with Jeff. The commissioners, or directors, as you know, earlier this year, the city council of the city of Milwaukee expressed their interest in pursuing a potential, again, the word potential, withdrawal as members of the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. The city of Milwaukee has been involved with the district since it was formed in 1990. But the council of the city of Milwaukee is considering options to potentially withdraw. The council has not made that decision yet, but they are going through the review process to see if that is indeed something they wish to do. We have been working at the staff level with district staff, county staff, and Milwaukee staff to look at what those possibilities could be if there was a separation. And Jeff can go into more details in a moment. But simply, the city of Milwaukee, they just had their election, just like we all did. So they're, I'm sure, waiting for their new council to take office to see what direction they would like to take. But again, that is still on the table as a potential possibility. And so, Jeff, if you'd like to share any more details with that.
Sure, I think where we're at in this process, the city, as part of its decision to look into withdrawing from the Parks District, filed a lawsuit in Clackamas County Circuit Court, a validation petition in which they sought to find out if it is a proper method to withdraw from NCPRD using Chapter 222. This was an issue that we had litigated in the Happy Valley matter, and the court had found Chapter 222 is not the proper method for a city to withdraw from NCPRD, given the factors that are present for how they came into the district. So it's very similar here in this situation. So the county filed appearance and opposition to their validation petition. We had a summary judgment argument on November 10th. Judge Weber, Clackamas County Circuit Court, had said she would rule by the end of the month, but she has, we're a little over that. But I anticipated a decision fairly soon as to which way the court determines that it's the proper method. But with that said, we have engaged the city, and without going into the settlement discussions, and we're trying to work with them on an amicable, equitable way for them to do that if they do choose to leave the Parks District. We just believe it needs to be done in the lawful way. And as far as we see it, that's Chapter 198, not Chapter 22. But the court will tell us what the court believes, and then we'll determine what the best legal path is from there.
Questions or comments for Jeff Mullins on this? Seeing none. Any other questions or comments on this particular topic?
All right.
Okay, thanks,
Thank
Gary.
you. The final discussion item tonight is status report on the district governance change project. I will lead off presenting and then ask if Mike or Jeff want to add anything. So directors, for over 10 years, the district has considered, should the district reconsider its statutory authority of how it is formed. Right now, the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District was created in 1990 by a vote of the people as an Oregon Revised Statute, or ORS Chapter 451, a county service facility, which means the county commissioners are also the governing body for the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. This Parks District is the only district in the entire state of Oregon that is under an ORS 451, governed by a county commission. Every other Parks District is a ORS Chapter 266, a Parks and Recreation District, which is governed by a separately elected governing body of people who live within that district. So for over 10 years, the district has discussed should we or shouldn't the district be separated from the county government. In 2014, it was actually put to the voters to consider a separation, and it failed at that time for multiple reasons, but that was the last time the district considered a new governance structure. Earlier this year, when this board met in March, you discussed this just in general terms, and you did not take a formal vote, but you did give a head nod to me and Mike to at least hire a consultant within our signing authorities to start to put together some assessments and reviews of what a governance change could look like. And so that work is just beginning. It's just in the preliminary stages. You made no decisions yet, directors. But in 2023, we do plan to bring back to you the results of what this contractor has come up with for you to discuss and decide, is it the time for the district to consider changing its ORS structure or not? That's again, no decisions have been made yet, but we're just starting that work today. And especially as you just discussed, if the city of Milwaukee indeed does separate, the structure of the district's going to change anyway, and what should be the proper structure of that. So we just started this work. If Mike, you want to add what's happened so far, but that's just want to give you an update on this. So Grover also brought this up. No decisions are made. You're not separating. Well, you do want to bring back in 2023 if that is something you'd like to consider as a district or not. Mike, would you like to add anything?
Just to add a little more flavor onto that, as Gary said, nothing has happened so far. We did go through a procurement process. We did have several respondents, but we haven't even made a decision yet on which direction we're going forward with one of those. So it will be, in the next couple of months, we hope to be bringing a status update, but definitively not any decision points for any foreseeable future until we start getting that data back.
So I wouldn't think that this board would find it challenging to have a discussion to change to a 266 when there's a couple of balls still in the air. For instance, we're the unknown of city of Milwaukee, and we're still working on the lease between the library and the Parks District and the formation of what this park is going to look like. There's still a funding gap for the library that unless there is a funding gap. Okay. And that needs to be addressed. So what's your comment on that, on the timing of the discussion on the 266?
I think I can answer part of that. As far as the 266, as far as it relates to an agreement with the county for the library, we can certainly build that into any agreement that we have, whether it be partition and sale with some sort of operating agreement for the joint site. You can put that in there for a successor organization to be bound by that as well. So that's something that we can contemplate and make sure we have in the agreement, so that if in the event it does change, we know what we're going to have. That's part of the stability I talked about with the agreement. As far as the decision to go out, I think we need to wait for this, the study to be completed, just as far as governance, but as far as the other agreements and how it affects operations, I can contemplate some of those in our planning for the agreement.
So what was the answer to my question?
Well, as far as I understood the first one part of your question, which was how does it relate to
The timing,
library?
the timing of
Yeah, the timing, I think you can contemplate some of this where it's not really a big concern as far as operations.
I'm talking about the governance decision to a 266.
So then for the first part of your question is the timing
Oh,
of the
if
decision
there was a governance
Yeah.
change, what would be the timing of that?
that I think,
And that's what's still up in the air. That's where we don't really have an idea until we start getting some feedback back from this consultant of when we would be looking at a potential ballot measure As Gary mentioned, we hope to bring information back to you in 2023. When? That's why he just said, I think, just 2023. We just don't know how the information is going to happen. But with for part of your question, part of the 266 process is we're redefining our boundaries. We're dissolving the existing boundaries and reforming new boundaries under the 266. And in doing so, we would have to be asking any government entities like the city of Milwaukee, do you want to be part of this new redistricting, reboundering effort? And they would have to give us an answer at that point, yes or no. If that was happening before the city of Milwaukee decisions had been made previous. So it's not cart before the horse. It's just really what happens first depends on what actions could happen. But what we anticipate, as I had told you back when we talked about this the last time, what I hope is we're able to come back to you with some solid data that gives you the ability to say, yes, this sounds viable. No, it doesn't sound viable at all, or it sounds viable, but just not yet. And then look at timing of when it is. But this was given to me literally one of the first days I was here as a topic that I needed to be looking at. So, 18.
Well, that's how we baptize new people. We just give you the most complicated items first, right? Thank you for that, Mike. Director Savas.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My preference would be a pause, and I'm going to state a number of reasons why. It's been over the years here, a number of years that there's been a little bit of at times friction with the city of Milwaukee, so it has been emanated in discussions either with staff or fellow electeds from the city and the county that the city of Milwaukee may pull out a few years ago, a couple years ago, recently, so on and so forth. So we went forward with the SEC methodology, and I had some reservations about that because when we have a stranded investment and we focus this solely on the district as it is today with its boundaries, including the city of Milwaukee, I have that same concern now that, and not only that, but the optics of the public. I think the public right now doesn't know. There's a lot of uncertainty with this. I think that we need to show a success as a district. I think this particular property, building a Concord project with the library would demonstrate success and build some confidence. I was around in 2014. I always been a supporter of transferring or putting it to the voters for consideration of 266. So I'm supportive of that. And going forward, past, present, I will be. I don't see anything changing in that regard. But I think it's a matter of timing, and we need to somehow. And I had those conversations. I went door to door in many parts of the district, talking to people about their thoughts when this was on the ballot and before it was on the ballot. So I heard those voices, I heard those concerns, and I've heard those concerns, other concerns since then. So I think we've got to regain the confidence of our constituents here in the district. Until such time, I don't think it may not be well understood right now with a lot of questions and not a lot of answers or certainty. So that's my preference, that we just pause until there's some, at least a determination with the city of Milwaukee.
Director Fisher.
Yeah, I see that there's a lot of self-determination within this community, the NCPRD district, and with Oak Grove doing their governance project and Milwaukee looking at establishing its own independence. Just as a practicality matter, I would suggest the thought of looking at all of that, not necessarily the governance, that's got to be a little bit separate, but at least in collaboration with Milwaukee, because that would be a different question for them, and having that on the table before they decide to withdraw, that might be something that they may want. So I don't know, but that's something that I'm thinking about. The other thing I'm wondering, whoever this consultant is there a group from the district advisory board that's helping to select the consultant? My thought is that buy-in with what those recommendations will be important for the district, and having some involvement in who's going to be doing that work might be beneficial.
We usually don't do that, Director, because we have specific procurement rules we have to follow at the county, but we can look offline if that's appropriate to invite a community member to participate. We'll look into that. Thank you. Will you please put your microphone right down too when you speak?
No.
And Director Schrader would like to speak.
Okay, Director Schrader.
Yes. Yeah, here's my question. If Milwaukee is considering leaving, shouldn't we, I'm just trying to go through this in my head. If we were to put the notion of a 266 on the ballot and people voted, Milwaukee could certainly vote not to join the district, isn't that correct? And then they could go ahead and have their own district. Wouldn't that be a cleaner way to do this? But maybe I'm just overtired and not feeling too good tonight. But,
We're going to let the attorney Jeff Munns take a
Okay.
crack at that. Go ahead.
Yeah, Chair. In this situation with a 266, we've already discussed this with the city of Milwaukee. Where they're at right now, they would not want to join. However, if the governance recommendation is to put this on the ballot as a 266, we would ask them again. Because you don't ever know until you ask the question at the time. Commissioner Schrader, Director Schrader, if we were to recommend a governance change to 266 and put it on the ballot, at that time, it would include what boundaries would be. So if the city of Milwaukee had told us it didn't want to be included, it would be a boundary of whatever it would be without the city of Milwaukee. If it included them, then they would be included. The city of Milwaukee has also discussed doing their own levy for parks. And so they wouldn't form their own district, as it were, for their parks. They would just fund it in a different way, which they had proposed to do a 5-year local option levy at the same rate as what NCPRD is right now. So there's different methods for them. They've thought about that as well. There've been conversations. And so when this comes to a decision, all those facts will be included for consideration. But where we're at right now, this is what I understand the status to be of the city of Milwaukee.
well, that to me would seem to make everyone happy. I mean, it just makes sense. That way Milwaukee will have their own city municipal parks district. The unincorporated area will have sovereignty and control over what they want to see in their parks. And we will be leaving, hopefully not leaving them, we'll still be collaborating with all of these entities, which we already do with municipalities and districts. And we would be also, before we just become more collaborative rather than the government body, we'd also be leaving the folks in that in the 266. We would continue to have the lease on the property potentially, but we would be really building trust with them and trusting them to take over their own destiny, which really kind of seems to solve a lot of issues to me. But again, I haven't heard from the public tonight, so maybe they don't agree with me, but just seems to be it'd be a quicker, cleaner way to get everybody what they need and want.
Thank you, Director Schrader. Director Scholl, you're up.
Yes. To maintain the confidence of constituents in this area, we need to remove constraints, remove barriers, avoid delays, expedite all actions to get this doggone library built. Period. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Amen.
So I'm in agreement with that too. Director Sets.
I just want to clarify just for the public listening, Commissioner Schrader, I think Mr. Munns responded, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, that the city cannot form a parks district. They can do a levy or they can fund it out of their general fund, but they can't form a district on their own, as I understand. Is that correct? Right. It'd be like the Parks Department. Right. We have Parks Department, like they currently have in Parks Board, I understand. So but they cannot form a separate district.
No, they would do it as part of their municipal city service delivery system. That's what I was thinking. And then it's all good. Okay.
Yep. Thank you, Director Schrader. Any other questions or comments on this issue? Seeing none. Gary, what's next?
Thank you. Next is the consent agenda, Chair, and Tony, would you please read the consent agenda?
The NCPRD consent agenda. I have one item, approval of meeting minutes from March 30th, 2022 and June 29th, 2022, NCPRD Board of Directors meetings.
Does any commission director wish to remove any item off this consent agenda? Seeing that, Director Fisher.
Thank you. Not removal, but just a correction. The spelling of my name is incorrect.
Uh-oh, well, we can't have that.
I know. That just goes to show we actually do read these minutes.
It was a
That's
test to see if you were ready. Thank you.
right.
And you are paying
It's
attention.
under those who say they are present. And so it's FISCHER. Everywhere else in the document, it is spelled correct.
Okay, all right. So do I hear a motion? For
Move to approve the meeting minutes of the two meeting minutes.
As amended.
Yes, yes. Director Staffis moves, so we approve the meeting minutes as amended, and Director Scholl has seconded that. Further discussion, seeing none, Tony, please take the poll.
Director Fisher,
Aye.
Director Scholl,
Aye.
Director Schrader,
Aye.
Director Savas,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Gary, what's next?
Next is district administrator and district director update. I just want to say, I want to thank all the NCPRD staff for their outstanding work every day. Everybody staff in the room, I appreciate all you do. Thank you very much. Mike, would you like to make any comments?
Just that I'm not gonna read all 20 pages of our division reports, but understand that what these are is the culmination. We provide a monthly report to the district advisory committee every month. And so this is just a 3-month collection from each division. Lots and lots of great stuff going on. I hope you've had a chance to read through some of these great things, including some staffing successes and being able to fill in some gaps in our planning. A great Latinx festival that we held in September. But 20 pages worth of just things that I couldn't be prouder of the staff, the community, volunteers for doing all the great things that we do. So.
You brought a question to my mind as you were speaking. When is the next meeting of the DAC?
It is a week from today, so
And how often do they meet?
once a month.
Okay, so they will have an opportunity to mull over all of these discussion items that we've had tonight. And I hope they have ample information, just like we have. So, DAC, have at it and mull it over. And I look forward to hearing back from you on that. Up next, I believe, is public communication. This portion of the agenda shall be limited to items of district business with the properly the object of board consideration and should be nonpartisan in nature, as the NCPRD Board of Directors is a nonpartisan governing body under Oregon revised statutes and county code. Testimony is limited to 3 minutes. Comments shall be courteous and respectful to all. As a reminder, you can email submissions for public communication at bcc@clackamas.us, and these will be accepted as part of the public record. However, we will not be reading them at this meeting. I will now open the meeting for public testimony and take in-person testimony first. And I believe Velma Hagenmiller would like to come forward. Please come forward. State your name, your area of residence, and you have 3 minutes. And while she's coming forward, is there anybody else in the room who would like to speak? Yes, did you fill out a card, madam? No. Okay, would you please, just real quick, and Stella, please sit down and go ahead.
Okay. My name is Thelma Hagen Miller. I reside in Oak Grove, Oregon, unincorporated area under your leadership. I have a question, I think, for Mike.
Go ahead.
There was a project manager assigned to the Concord project right from the very beginning. His name was Jason Varga. Is he still involved?
Yes,
Because he was not at the hearings officer meeting.
he was on vacation.
Okay, well, I was quite surprised that he didn't show up because that was an important meeting.
He was on vacation.
Okay, I can forgive him. I just wanted to know if he was still our project manager
Yes, he is.
on this whole thing. There's more conditional use coming up. I know that. Shouldn't that be coming up pretty soon?
It'll be coming up once the project is gotten to a completion point or a design completion point where we know exactly what needs to be applied for as a conditional use. So soon is relative in the next 6 months, I'm hoping. Yes, definitely. Next week, I know, but I don't have a definitive time.
Okay. Just a general statement, IGAs, intergovernmental agreements, the Parks District, the Library District, and all the other districts, the Sewer District and the Water District. They're all part of me. I pay taxes to every single one of them. And it's very disconcerting to listen to them butting head. Very disconcerting. And I get a lot of calls about that. Part of my property taxes goes to the Library District. Part of my property taxes goes to the Parks District. And that makes it even more confusing when I listen to them, well, we can't do this because, and the county's attorney's involvement has to recognize that we are the guiding force out here. And when I heard the staff at the planning department talk about at the conditional use meeting before the hearings officer, well, the project might not go forward, so. And I'm kind of, and anybody who listened to that heard me say at the end of that statement, the project will go forward. Nod your heads, yes. You're my bosses. You're my people that I pay, yes. And with that, basically, thanks for holding the meeting here so I could come. Good night.
Well, Thelma, thank you very much for coming forward and speaking. And this is a lovely room. And
It
it's the
is.
first time that I've been in it. It's very comfortable.
But you know what?
What?
Tootie, when this was a school, there were paintings up here. And those paintings, I hope they're still in the Parks District
Not sure.
inventory. You need to look into that because some people have talked about the artwork that was in this school when it was a school, that they're disappointed when they came into this meeting room and saw that there wasn't any of it.
Well, maybe we can do
children.
some digging around. I think that's probably an important factor. And maybe there is some artwork left over from the children who attended, which, by the way, I love children's artwork. My daughter's 32. I still have some of her first grade artwork.
Oh, I do too.
And it's hysterical and lovely at the same time. So I understand what you're saying. And we could use some sprucing up in here. These monotone colors, gray and white, are nice, but like you say, artwork could add. Maybe they can snoop around and see what they can come up with.
And when I talk to people, I don't talk about the community center. I talk about the cultural center. We do not have a cultural center here in this part of the county. So I always refer to it as the Concord Cultural Center.
Well, maybe that's something the DAC can consider and make a recommendation.
Good.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you for coming forward.
thank you.
You bet. Up next, Anada Blackmar, please come forward. Now, I said your name right this time, didn't I?
You said it the way it looks, but it's Anita.
Anita.
Nobody can ever get that,
Okay.
and I don't expect anybody. to get
Okay,
that,
all
so
right,
it's
I'm
fine.
trying.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
introduce yourself and your area of residence.
Yes, Anita Blackmar, Fair Oaks Avenue in Oak Grove. Nearby, this is a short trip to get here. It's
Good.
nice to be here. I just have two things on my mind. I was surprised, as I know a number of people were, about the ground lease is the preferred form of agreement between NCPRD and the county. In order to maintain the integrity of the parcel, that's news to me, brand new information. And I remember, I think that there was a solid agreement at one point that the library would be able to purchase the land for $300,000.
No,
No?
no.
Okay, there's a
There
belief
have, so
that
I'm
was
gonna
the
go,
case.
yeah, I'm gonna just interrupt just a second, because you'll have time to
Yeah,
say
sure,
what you need to
sure.
say.
Okay.
I'm not sure how these assumptions get made in the community, but that's why we're here tonight.
Sure.
To bring this information to you for the first time. This is the first time hearing it. Did we have an agreement for 300,000 ever?
No.
No, in the budget for the overall original project, there was money allocated from, I believe, a library source for consideration of a building, but it wasn't a purchase, it wasn't anything conveying a deed.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, well, I am somewhat new to the library scene, so I'm doing catch up on that. So, okay, thank you. One thing that threw me about this new idea, which I hadn't heard of before, was the word preferred, because I wasn't sure exactly who was preferring the lease idea. And I wondered about, whether the library advisory board would be consulted and whether the Concord task force would be able to weigh in. And I know, Paul, you brought that up. And the other thing on my mind was, also on the same page, it says the district also plans to develop the fields here for better outdoor recreation. And I was very curious about this, the specifics of that. Does that mean sports, or does that mean making it suitable for continuing movies in the park and events, like theater in the park, music, that sort of thing?
Do we have any information on the development of the ball fields or whatever you want to call them?
As we've described to the EAC in updates on this project, nothing has been determined yet because we just barely got the location of the library set. And we still have land issues that we need to figure out how big the field is going to be, what it could go. Nothing is off the table for programming. But it's still being decided.
We're still being decided, of course, the library board, task force, the VAC, Baskin Robbins Ice Cream. Anybody can meet and give us your opinion on how you think the governance model can go forward, including a lease agreement, what type of lease agreement, a purchase. So yes, of course, we'll listen to all of that, and then this particular board of directors will have to make a decision.
Well, I look forward to all the continued outreach to the community and
Sure.
input from everybody.
Sure, absolutely. Anything else?
That's it.
Well, thank you for coming, and thank you for allowing us in your wonderful neighborhood. This has been a delightful meeting tonight.
I agree.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the room who would like to come forward? Tony, do we have anybody virtually?
Chair, at this time I have one registered to speak. I will start with Jan Carruthers. Ms. Carruthers.
Just a moment. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, Jan, please proceed.
Okay, great. Thanks. Appreciate this meeting and always a chance to share with you all. One comment on the whole process about the library disposition at its whatever end of useful age. Our current library is at least 36 years in. So I was curious to know who would determine when the library is no longer useful. And if we were to give it back to the NCPRD, where would there be funds to create a new library? So I'm curious to know, where are the monies if we invest many millions of dollars in building it? When we say it's done, how does the library district have more money in order to?
Are you finished, Jan? Did she hang up?
No, technological.
Okay, so I'm not sure I completely understand your question, but we're going to have our attorney take a stab at it.
Okay. I think that if I understood your question correctly, is who would make these decisions and where would the money come from? And I think part of the answer is, not to push it off on the future, but that's a decision that the Board of County Commissioners or the Board of NCPRD we are going to be making 50 years in the future. And so we
Right.
don't some of those answers, of course. But the goal as we're putting this agreement together is such that whoever those parties are in the future are in a reasonable spot to make a good decision. And like you know, the existing library is over 30 years old, and which is one of the reasons that we're trying to move quickly to build this library, is that it's
Right.
it meets the needs of the community. But I think that it's really hard to answer those questions, but what we're trying to do with the agreement is leave it such that neither party is in a bad situation when that day comes.
I appreciate that, but that is the consideration. The library will go on whether, say, the building wears out. So if we've only paid $1 a month's rent for its lifetime, we will have paid, 50 times $1 a month and made a huge sunk investment. So that's my question. And then the second is just a continuing pitch for localized community involvement. The park at Jennings Lodge, former Jennings Lodge School, is there's a proposal out to find a designer, and yet there has been no direct community requests, and we're trying to answer those questions. And so I'm just assuming and trusting that there will be specific and localized community outreach around a neighborhood park. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Tony, anyone else?
I do not have anyone else registered to speak. If there is someone who would like to provide public comment, please use the raise hand feature. I will call on you in the order received. Madam Chair, you do not have any hands raised.
Thank you. I will now close the public communication portion of this meeting. Gary Schmidt, what's next?
Next is Director Communication.
And we have a list of order. Director Scholl, you're up first.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank the residents of Oak Lodge and the members of the District Advisory Committee for your patience, your work, and your dedication to agreeing to see this Concord site have a new life, bring a new cultural center to your community. And I hope that we can all work together. You've heard many issues tonight that might sound very daunting, but it's my hope that we can expedite all these things so that you can get your shovels out and get to work on this new library. And I'd like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Director Scholl. Director Fisher, you're up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Director Smith.
Whatever. Judy works this too.
Yeah, thank you, Judy. Happy to have participated for the last almost 6 years, learning all of the issues related to this district. This is my last meeting. Just some final words that I just want to share. So many highlights, so many celebrations, so much wonderful community engagement. And I am really hopeful that this district self-determines to its own governance and gets out of the oversight of the county commission. I think that will be best for the vision of the district and way less bureaucracy, which I don't think is necessary when we're dealing with parks and recreation, which is what the community loves and thrives on. So I have a hope for that. I'm happy that the conversation is taking off well, and I look forward to hearing more about that. I do have a little bit of a self-interest. I don't know if my fellow board members know this, but while when I was a very young lawyer, and I was very stressed out because you have to learn how to be a lawyer, and it's really hard when you're a really new lawyer. But one thing I did was I was really involved with New Century Players, and that is a theater group that's here in the this area. And I was in a lot of plays, and I can remember at the time everybody was so stressed out to go on stage and like, oh my gosh, I was just so scared. I'm like, oh my goodness, just let me out on that stage so I can forget my life just for 2 hours so I can just be there in the moment engaged in this. And I do know that this site, there's been a lot of conversations about a performance space. I would really love, I can go ahead and state all my things now. I'm out the door. I can say that I want this for me in my community, my fellow thespians in the area, that there's a lot of good souls working real hard on this. Elizabeth Goebel, who's been before this board many times advocating. She's been a real champion. And if not in this space, somewhere, this community, this area, unincorporated Clackamas County needs a performance space for all the great art and culture, as Thelma Hagenmiller has so articulately stated. So it is with great pleasure and a great honor that I bid you all adieu. And while I will not be making decisions on these efforts, I will be watching what happens in the future of this wonderful Parks District.
So tell me, Director Fisher, what was your first role you played as an actress?
Well, in New Century Players, I was cast as the town tramp. And
I walked right through that, didn't I?
my current father-in-law was then my boyfriend's father, Gordon Mauser, who did the casting, and his wife, Janet Mauser, costumed me. And I tell you, I would never have a political career in the future if anybody found any of those pictures of me as the town tramp in the New Century Player show of Faith County was the show.
Faith County.
Yep, and we performed out of Rex Putnam. They had
Oh,
a
nice. Yeah.
Kelly Marchant, who was the drama teacher there for many years, had a collaboration, and that's where they did the plays.
Performing arts is a lot of fun, quite enjoyable for the community. That would be something that would be fun here too. Thank you very much for sharing that. Director Salas, you're up next. Do you have a performance in your background you might want to talk about?
No, not that sort. I do want to say, being a member of this community, moving here in 1984 from Eugene, that I lived up here for 38 years, and it always impresses me. Even Monday, I talk to people that either grew up here and remain here, or people that grew up here, moved somewhere else, their family's still here, but there's so many ties. So it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in Portland, you're in Valhalla, or there are people that used to live here and went to school at this very school. My kids went to school here as well. So there's a lot of history. This building, this property is a fabric of the community in so many ways. And I know that when it comes to the improvements on this property, whether it's a library, a park, whatever it may be, this community knows how to come together and advocate for what they want. So I'm excited for the changes here. I'm also optimistic that we get to a good place on behalf of the district at large, not just this property, but for the entire district. So I'm glad to be back holding a meeting in this building within the boundaries of the district. I do appreciate the fact that we're making progress. I appreciate the administrator helping launch the audit, which is trying to identify and remedy some of the agreements and lack of agreements and steps that will put us back on track. I think that's really important. And I think the constituents of this district and the future constituents of the 266 district of NCPRD would really get behind really a solid agency that they can put trust in, and knowing that it's serving them as an electorate. It's sorely needed in this area. We have areas, probably have growing pockets of poverty in this area. So I am very concerned about making sure that there's educational aspects, which is libraries and park aspects for those impoverished children and families that are in this area and growing. So that's all I have for today. I wish everyone a great happy holidays, and we'll see you next year.
Thank you. Director Schrader, you're up.
Well, I do have to admit, because of this conversation, that I was in Showboat, Carousel, South Pacific.
Wow.
Did you sing a Director
Yeah.
Schrader? You did.
Yes, I did plenty of theater, and I was one of the few kids in my class who I almost went into theater. And I always tell people, I guess I substituted politics for theater sometimes. But my big break was when I played Stella and Johnny Belinda. So I am also hopeful that we can, really see this become a cultural center. And again, rather than be an actress in the end, I ended up as an entomologist and a librarian. So I'm hopeful when this library is built, I can come do story times and I can help do nature walks with all the kids that are going to enjoy the new pieces, the new things that we're going to be building for our community. And I do hope that folks will think about a 266 because I think it will give them sovereignty. I think that it will give them self-governance. I think that's going to be important as we move towards the future. So Merry Christmas, everyone, and have a Happy New Year. And Commissioner or Director Fisher, we will miss you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. My concluding remarks are community members present, those listening, those going forward, spread the word, please. Offer your input quickly. We want to move forward. We want to get this project done, okay? And it's going to be our job here. We're going to push and push and push and get this done. And it's the most beautiful, to me, one of the most beautiful things to have a library at a park. Now, I too was a librarian in an elementary school, and I don't think I've ever mentioned that before. So when you talk about children's books, quite familiar with them, we talk about children's art on the walls in some of these places. It's a very joyous opportunity to look at those creative minds and an expression through the form of their art. And that's in this day and age when they've been locked down for 2 years and they need to get out and be expressive and just be allowed to be children in a park, in a library, in a school district like this, or school building like this. Moving forward, I would like to see way less governance that hampers the ability of this community to move forward, move towards self-determination, because it is a very worthy effort for a very deserving community. Seeing no further business before this board today, we are adjourned.